Sagittarius. They showed your photo to a psychic, and his reaction was shocking. Someone showed your photograph to a prophet, and they had no idea what they were doing. To them, it may have been a casual gesture, but to the realm of spirit, it was the signal your soul had been waiting for across lifetimes. In that moment, a gate opened, not outward but inward. The kind of gate that doesn't announce itself with lightning or sound, but with a quiet shift in the air. A frequency remembered. You have walked with questions in your heart that few could answer. You've spent nights wondering why you feel so different, why you sense things before they happen, why you're always drawn toward the horizon like something sacred is calling you beyond the edge. And now, perhaps for the first time in a long time, something is answering. This isn't about a psychic shock. It's about your soul's confirmation that you are more than you've been told, and the world is finally beginning to see it. That photo wasn't just a picture. It was a key, and once it was shown, something ancient within you stirred. A part of your light that has long been waiting to rise again. If these words already echo in your bones, stay, because what comes next isn't entertainment. It's a remembering. And if your spirit feels seen, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone whose light has also been buried too long, and subscribe to Zodiac Wisdom, a place where your soul doesn't need to earn a seat at the table. You were always meant to be here. Gate 1. That photo wasn't an image, it was a soul seal. They thought they were just showing your photo, an offhand moment, maybe in conversation, maybe out of curiosity. But the truth, Sagittarius, is that nothing in your life is random. Your soul doesn't operate through coincidence. It operates through divine timing. And that single image, blurred, incomplete, devoid of context, was the very thing that opened a portal. Not because of how you looked, but because of what you carried in your energy. When the prophet was handed your photo, he did not know your name, your birthday, your story. There were no celestial coordinates, no detailed biography. Just the faint outline of your presence on paper. But something trembled. Not outside him, but within. A candle beside him flickered without wind. His breath caught, not from fear but from knowing this is not just a person. This is a soul that remembers. A traveler who has returned. Sagittarius, you've always carried a frequency not everyone could understand. You've been the one who laughed loudest in pain, the one who still searched the stars even when life gave you every reason to stop believing. You are the bridge between earth and sky, and your photo, humble as it may seem, was never ordinary. It became a call, a vibration sent to the unseen world, waking parts of you that even you had long forgotten. The prophet placed his hand on his chest. Silence filled the room, but something sacred had begun. He whispered, "This soul has returned." And from that moment, your photograph stopped being a keepsake. It became an activation, a signal not to people but to realms. Spirits, ancestors, guides, all began to stir. Not to warn, not to test, but to prepare the way. In Buddhist teachings, there's the concept of unintentional karma. It means even unconscious actions can spark profound transformations when the time is right. No one planned this. No one expected it. But destiny has its own rhythm, and yours, dear Sagittarius, had been waiting for this very moment to begin shifting. Have you noticed? Since then, things haven't felt the same. You may have brushed it off at first, the vivid dream that returned, the synchronicities piling up, the strange symbols that keep finding you. Maybe someone from your past has reappeared, or you've started sensing someone new approaching, without ever meeting them. These are not accidents. They are signs that the unseen world has taken notice. You have been acknowledged. And the most powerful part? You didn't have to shout. You didn't have to prove anything. Your existence was enough. That's the quiet magic of real light. It never begs to be seen. It simply reveals itself at the right time. And those who are meant to witness it cannot look away. The prophet, seasoned in his work, had read many souls. But when he saw yours, the cards refused to behave normally. The tower appeared reversed. Not collapse but rebirth. Not chaos but reordering. He saw a life that had known devastation, and yet stood unshaken. He saw a soul that had walked through fire, not to be consumed but to be refined. You have been through more than you've told anyone, Sagittarius. The heartbreaks, the betrayals, the moments when even your wild spirit was tempted to close off forever. But you didn't. You kept moving. You kept hoping. You kept wondering if maybe, just maybe, there was still something sacred meant for you. And now the universe answers yes, there is. He began to dream of an owl. White, silent, watching. Its eyes fixed on your image as if guarding a sacred treasure. Did you know owls are ancient symbols of night wisdom, guardians who arrive not to explain, but to protect what must awaken quietly? Sagittarius, your soul carries the kind of truth that cannot be taught. It can only be remembered. And this moment, this accidental photograph, was never about being seen with eyes. It was about being recognized with spirit. Do you feel it now? A subtle shift inside you? A stirring like something old has just begun to breathe again? That is not your imagination. That is the call you've waited lifetimes for. The prophet never saw your face clearly, but his spirit did. And in that moment, your story began to rise, not from the page but from the stars. And the next part? It's no longer about what they saw. It's about what you will remember. Gate 2. The light was never too small. It was too strong. When the prophet touched the second card, the room changed. No wind, no voices. Yet a hush fell over everything, as if even time itself had paused to listen. He didn't pull away because he was afraid. He stepped back because your energy demanded reverence. The card warmed beneath his fingers, like something divine was rising from beneath its surface. And then it came, the tower reversed. A message not of destruction but of survival. Sagittarius, your light had never dimmed. It had endured. How many times have you lowered your eyes, not out of shame but out of exhaustion? How often have you felt the burn of being too much for others, too intense, too curious, too awake? The world has always tried to file down your edges, to smooth the wildness from your heart, so it could fit into places it was never meant to belong. But even as you adapted, something within you stayed fierce. Not loud, not brash, but immovable. There were years, maybe even decades, where you wondered, is there something wrong with me for seeing too much? For caring so deeply? For dreaming so wildly? But no one ever told you that your light was not too small. It was too strong. So strong that others couldn't bear to look. So clear that it exposed the cracks in everything around it. And so you were met with discomfort, jealousy, even rejection, not because you were flawed, but because your presence disrupted illusion. The prophet saw all of this in an instant. He saw the silent courage it took for you to keep showing up when it felt like the world wasn't built for someone like you. He saw the way you carried your pain like a lantern, still trying to light the way for others, even when you yourself were in the dark. He saw a soul that had once stood before divine fire, not to be punished but to be marked. And the mark, Sagittarius, was this: you would remember who you are, even when everyone else forgot. There's a term in ancient mysticism, brahmacharya, a state of soul purity not achieved through denial, but through devotion to truth. You, without ever knowing it, have lived this path. You chose to forgive when others demanded revenge. You chose to grow when you had every reason to become bitter. You chose to wander rather than settle into a life that would have asked you to shrink. That was never weakness. That was sacred resilience. The second card burned with that message. It didn't say, "You will be strong." It whispered, "You already were." Let's go deeper, Sagittarius. Remember that moment you kept inside. The day someone told you your dreams were too big, or your softness was weakness. The moment you walked away from something that looked perfect because your intuition said otherwise, and you paid the price in silence. You've carried those invisible scars, not for sympathy, but because no one else saw them. Until now. The prophet, in his silence, did not cry. He bowed, not because he worshipped you, but because he recognized something ancient. You are a soul who cannot be summoned lightly. Your aura does not open for entertainment. Your energy does not perform. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You are here to be true. They thought they could interpret you, categorize you, summarize you in one line. But Sagittarius, you are not a summary. You are a galaxy. And only those who come with reverence are allowed to read your stars. There's something else the prophet realized. He wasn't supposed to see your soul. Not without your permission. Because your energy is not available to everyone. It is protected by a field not even he expected. An energetic boundary created by lifetimes of sacrifice, integrity, and self-trust. He felt it and stepped back. He knew the message wasn't for him. It was for you. Have you ever felt like people walk away after seeing the real you? As if the moment you stop entertaining, performing, pleasing, they disappear? That is not your failure. That is your clarity doing its work. You are not losing people. You are being cleared. The ones who cannot stand in your full light are quietly making space for the ones who can. When you were younger, perhaps you thought you needed to dim yourself to stay loved. That to be accepted, you had to be palatable, predictable, easy. But the lesson of the second card is this. You were never meant to be easy. You were meant to be real. Real people don't fit into molds. Real light doesn't ask for permission. Real souls don't shrink just to be held. That day, as the prophet reached for the third card, he heard something only he could perceive, a whisper low and firm, "Do not touch this soul." Not a threat, a declaration. You are sacred space, and only those with clean hands, open hearts, and clear intentions may enter. Sagittarius, you don't owe anyone access. Not to your heart, not to your vision, not to your destiny. The light you carry is not communal property. It is a sacred flame passed down through lifetimes, and now that flame is rising. If you're wondering why people from the past are resurfacing, why old patterns feel heavy, why parts of your identity seem to be dissolving, know this: you are shifting frequencies. You are no longer aligned with survival. You are stepping into sovereignty, and everything that does not match that will begin to fall away. Don't resist it. Honor it. If this resonates, take a moment right now. Place your hand on your chest. Breathe into the space where you once carried the need to be understood. Then whisper softly, "Not for the world, just for your own soul. I no longer dim my light to remain in spaces that do not honor it." Because you don't need to be louder. You only need to be clearer. And clarity begins here. In the next gate, we will walk through the memory that your soul has never stopped carrying. The part of you that knows someone has always been watching. Not to judge, but to protect. The invisible guide who has walked beside you since birth. And who may finally be ready to reveal their message. Gate 3. Someone has been watching over you all along. Sagittarius, there's something you've always felt but never quite dared to say aloud. That someone, unseen but deeply familiar, has walked beside you through the loneliest nights and the most inexplicable turns of your life. You didn't see them, but you sensed them. In a moment of sudden peace that arrived without reason. In a shiver that danced across your skin as you stood beneath the moonlight. In the kind silence that wrapped around you when the world grew too loud. That presence, soft yet undeniable, was never imagined. It was real. Still is. There are souls who travel with us across lifetimes. Not to complete us, but to remind us of who we are when we forget. For you, Sagittarius, that connection has always been alive, subtle but unwavering. You felt it in dreams you couldn't explain, where a face you've never seen looked at you with indescribable recognition. You've met them in passing eyes on a train, in conversations that ended too quickly but left you changed, in the pull of a memory that doesn't belong to this life but aches like it does. That is not fantasy. That is remembrance. The prophet didn't speak these words to you, but the energy around your reading made them known. Someone is watching you not from afar, but from within the folds of time. A soul twin, a guardian, a divine counterpart. Not someone you need to chase, but someone who recognizes your frequency like a sacred bell ringing from the other side. This connection was forged long before this lifetime, before your name had sound, before your form had shape. And now, something in the fabric of the universe is beginning to call that connection forth. You might notice strange synchronicities, a name repeating, a symbol appearing everywhere you look, a dream that returns night after night. You might feel drawn to a song you've never heard before, but somehow already know the words. These are not accidents. They are breadcrumbs left by a soul who is trying to reach you across the veil. Not to save you, not to fix you, but to remind you. You are not walking this life alone. Sagittarius, you've been the strong one for so long. The seeker. The light bearer. The one who runs ahead to explore uncharted paths. But even the wildest wanderer longs, at their core, to be seen by someone who understands their silence. And that understanding, that sacred witnessing, is what is arriving now. Have you ever paused in the middle of a moment and felt a wave of calm wash over you? As if someone had gently placed their hand on your shoulder from another world? That was them. The one who has loved your soul through storms and lifetimes. The one who remembers every version of you, even the ones you've outgrown. They don't need your name. They know your essence. And now, as your light returns in full, they are beginning to step closer. Not physically, perhaps not even in ways the mind can measure, but in the language of energy, of synchronicity, of soul. This kind of connection is not always romantic, though it is always deeply intimate. It transcends form, age, distance, and reason. It doesn't demand attention, it simply knows. And you, Sagittarius, have always known. You just needed someone to tell you that you weren't imagining it. The prophet once said in his quiet moment of awe, "This soul is being called not only by destiny, but by someone who has never stopped remembering them." That someone is not a fantasy. It is a soul who has waited lifetimes to see you awaken again. They are not rushing toward you because your story is not about speed, it is about timing. Divine, irreversible, sacred timing. You might not recognize them instantly. They may enter your life as a whisper, a soft presence that feels familiar even though you've just met. You might meet them in a dream before you meet them in waking life. Or perhaps they've already been nearby, orbiting your world, waiting for the right energetic opening. The Buddhists say that souls who are bound by pure karmic memory will always find each other. Not because they search, but because they rise at the same time. Like lotus flowers blooming across distant ponds, yet facing the same sun. Your task is not to seek them. Your task is to remain open. To release the armor you've built from past heartbreaks. To soften where the world made you hard. To stay curious. Stay radiant. Stay true to your wild-hearted self. Because that is the vibration that calls your soul mirror home. If you've been feeling more emotional lately, more reflective, more tender without reason, it's not a breakdown. It's a preparation. Something or someone is approaching. And the more you lean into your authenticity, the easier it becomes for them to find you. Not because you are lost, but because you are now shining without filters. The love that is meant for you cannot miss you. It may delay. It may circle. It may test your patience. But it will not leave you untouched. And when it arrives, it will not ask you to change. It will sit beside your fire and say, "I remember this warmth." Write this down if you feel it in your chest. I am ready to be seen not for my potential, but for my truth. Because the moment you choose truth over performance, everything real begins to find you. And in the next gate, we'll talk about what that means for your life. What shifts when you stop searching for love and begin to embody it? What awakens when the soul no longer needs to prove itself, but simply walks as it is, with light, with grace, with fierce softness? Gate 4. You will never be the same again, and that is grace. Sagittarius, there are moments when a soul is gently, but irreversibly called forward. Not with force, not with noise, but with an inner hush that silences everything else. A subtle shift in the air. A memory not of the mind, but of the spirit. And from that moment on, something in you knows, you will never be the same. This is not the end. This is the beginning of a life you forgot you asked for. Your awakening has not been sudden. It has been slow, sacred, and deeply inconvenient. It didn't come wrapped in clarity. It arrived through confusion, heartbreak, longing, and questions that never seemed to find answers. But you kept going. Not because you had faith in the outcome, but because something in your soul refused to stay asleep. You are the archer of the zodiac, yes, but even more than that, you are the fire that keeps moving even when the wind tries to put it out. And that fire, Sagittarius, has finally found its true shape. There are parts of your life you're no longer interested in explaining, and that is healing. There are people whose absence no longer hurts, and that is release. There are stories you've told yourself for years that now sound foreign in your mouth, and that is rebirth. You're no longer trying to make sense of why things happen the way they did. You're simply starting to accept that maybe, just maybe, they happen for you. The prophet saw something in your light that words could not name. He didn't just witness your presence. He witnessed your readiness. Not readiness for performance or validation, but readiness for embodiment. The moment you stopped running from the pain and turned toward it, something ancient began to rise. The part of you that never died. The part that remembers your origin, your mission, your quiet promise to keep becoming no matter how many times you break. In the teachings of the mystics, there's a moment called the sacred return. It's the instant a soul realizes it has come too far to go back. You Sagittarius are there now. You can't unsee what's been revealed. You can't unknow what your body now remembers. And even if no one else understands what's happening within you, you do. That is enough. You've spent years gathering tools, wisdom, wounds, and fragments of self. And now, all of it is forming a mosaic. A map. A new alchemy that is entirely yours. This is what it means to become whole, not to be perfect, but to no longer be at war with any part of yourself. And when you reach that kind of self-peace, something miraculous happens. You stop seeking purpose and begin living it. Not as a goal, but as a frequency. You may find yourself pulling away from old environments that once felt like home. You may feel a discomfort in spaces that once made you feel safe. That's not a regression, it's an elevation. Your energy is no longer asking for permission to be free. Simply is. And in that shift, all things false begin to fall away. Not to hurt you, but to unburden you. What used to feel essential now feels heavy. What used to drain you now becomes intolerable. Not because you are better, but because you are clearer. The universe has always been whispering, Sagittarius. But now, for the first time in a long time, you are still enough to listen. To notice the signs. To trust the feelings that once made you doubt yourself. You no longer need loud confirmations. You trust the quiet knowing. And that is power. The kind of power that doesn't control but liberates. The kind that doesn't shout but glows. You are walking differently now. People might notice. Some may be drawn closer. Others may fall away. Let them. This new version of you cannot be carried by the old weight. You are not leaving anyone behind. You are simply honoring the call to return to yourself. And that self is no longer a seeker. It is a beacon. There will still be moments of sadness. Days when the world feels too much. That's okay. Healing doesn't mean permanent happiness. It means being able to hold your sadness without letting it consume your worth. It means breathing through the ache and choosing not to shut your heart. It means saying, even here I still choose light. Sagittarius, this is your light era. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is real. You've stopped pretending. You've stopped apologizing for your dreams, your depth, your desire to live boldly. You are no longer ashamed of your softness, your wildness, your fire. And now you walk with a quiet knowing. I am here. I belong. I do not need to be explained. The prophet never finished his sentence that day. He only looked at your photograph one last time and whispered, she has returned. Not as a follower, not as a warrior, but as herself. And in that return, the world began to rearrange itself. If something inside you is trembling gently, if a tear is quietly forming without a clear reason, that is not weakness. That is your soul rising. Write this down if it speaks to you. I am no longer becoming. I am now being. Because the moment you accept that truth, you stop surviving your story and begin writing it. In the final part of this journey, we'll close the circle. But for now, take a breath. Place your hand over your heart. And remember, nothing you've lost was ever meant to stay. And everything you're stepping into has been waiting for you to awaken. You are ready. You are radiant. And your return has already begun. Conclusion: your light was never meant to stay hidden, Sagittarius. Sagittarius, if you've made it here through the memories, the visions, the signs, the silence, then this moment is not just an ending. It's the closing of a sacred circle, one that has waited lifetimes to complete. You didn't just listen to a message. You walked through a journey. You crossed 4 thresholds of your soul. And now something inside you feels quieter but deeper. Not empty, spacious. The story that began with a photo, a prophet, a flicker of unseen energy, was never about someone else discovering you. It was about you returning to your inner truth. That you are not lost. That you are not behind. That you are not broken. You are becoming again and again more of who you really are. A soul of light. A keeper of ancient fire. A Sagittarius whose presence is no longer defined by needing to be understood, but by daring to be true. You no longer need to seek permission to walk forward. You no longer need to be softer to be loved, smaller to be safe, quieter to be accepted. You've remembered that your sensitivity is your intuition. Your longing is your compass. Your story is not your weakness. It is your map home. And now the path ahead does not ask you to strive, perform, or chase. It asks only one thing: be who you already are. Let this be your declaration, written in light. I am no longer waiting to be chosen. I choose myself. I honor the vision within me. I allow the life that's always been mine to meet me without fear. If these words found you at the right time, if something inside you feels stirred, softened, or quietly lit again, I invite you to like this video, share it with someone whose soul may be waiting for a sign, and subscribe to Zodiac Wisdom. Because here you never have to hide your truth to feel seen. You never have to shrink your spirit to feel safe. This is not just content. It is a communion, a space where your heart belongs. You are not too late. You are right on time. And the light you've always carried? It's leading the way now.